Whispers on Steel, Book 1 of the Railway Inheritance, written by Melody Gilly. Chapter 8. Morning sunshine streamed through the cottage windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden beams. Sonya sat cross-legged on the window seat, notebook open on her lap, pen hovering indecisively above the blank page. She'd been in the same position for nearly an hour, still dressed in flannel pajamas and an oversized cardigan that had once belonged to her mother. The cottage wrapped around her in peaceful silence. Uncle Gregory had departed before dawn, leaving only a hastily scrawled note about business in London and expectations to return by evening. The solitude had initially seemed perfect for writing, for sorting the tangled thoughts that had kept her awake most of the night. Yet the page remained stubbornly empty. She sighed, setting aside the notebook to gaze out at the Yorkshire countryside. Rolling hills stretched toward the horizon, stone walls crisscrossing the landscape like ancient stitches holding the fabric of the land together. Somewhere beyond that middle distance lay the abandoned railway tracks where she'd walked with Sullivan just hours ago, examining hidden documents by moonlight, feeling the strange electricity of his presence beside her. She turned her head towards her mother's journal once more. The story seemed to be consuming her personality and changing her into something entirely new. There was a sense of hopelessness in her heart as she touched the journal's ribbons. August 12th, 1942. Elizabeth found me crying in the garden this morning. I thought I was alone among the roses, but she has a way of moving silently. I couldn't hide the tears quickly enough. After what I witnessed at Whitby last month, sleep has become impossible. Sebastian watches me during meals, his eyes calculating what I might have seen, what I might do with that knowledge. Elizabeth sat beside me and offered her handkerchief, fine linen with her initials in pale blue. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she made an extraordinary proposition. She has been volunteering at St. Mary's Hospital in the village, helping with administrative work for wounded soldiers. They need someone with organizational skills and discretion to manage patient records. She has convinced Sebastian to release me from my railway duties 3 days each week so I can assist her at the hospital instead. I was stunned. Sebastian allowing me away from his sight? From his operations? Elizabeth explained that even he cannot argue against supporting our returning soldiers. She found the one argument he couldn't refute without revealing his true priorities. When I asked why she would do this for me, she simply said I reminded her of herself when she first came to Whispering Pines. "Everyone deserves space to breathe," she said. "I begin tomorrow." 3 days a week away from the railway manifests, from Sebastian's watchful presence, from the constant fear of discovering another irregularity that might lead to another midnight train. 3 days to remember who I was before. This small act of mercy from Elizabeth makes me wonder how she has maintained her humanity in this house, married to a man like Sebastian. There is steel beneath her gentle exterior. I suspect Sebastian underestimates her, perhaps to his eventual detriment. For the first time in weeks, I feel something resembling hope. September 3rd, 1942. The patient in room 12 died this morning. Lieutenant Farrow, age 24, a submariner, rescued from the North Sea after his vessel was struck by enemy fire. He had been delirious for days, muttering about lights beneath the waves and voices in the deep. The nurses attributed his ravings to the trauma, to the morphine, to the fever that eventually took him. I am not so certain. While organizing his personal effects, I found detailed coordinates scratched onto the inside cover of his Bible, a location in the North Sea. Below the numbers, a single phrase, "They found it. I should have given everything directly to the naval officer who came to collect the lieutenant's belongings. Instead, I copied the coordinates onto a scrap of paper that now burns in my pocket like a hot coal. Those numbers align precisely with one of the route deviations I noted in Sebastian's shipping manifests last month, a deviation that sent 3 unmarked vessels 60 miles off their documented course. This cannot be a coincidence. After my shift ended, I walked along the cliffs overlooking the distant sea. The September sky was heavy with approaching storm clouds, the water below dark and restless. I thought about all the vessels that traverse those waters, carrying their mysterious cargo to unknown destinations. What had Lieutenant Farrow's submarine encountered? What had they found that was worth documenting in the one place a dying man would be certain no one would look, his Bible? More troubling still, how did Sebastian's shipping routes anticipate this discovery? The manifest I examined was dated 3 weeks before Lieutenant Farrow's submarine mission. It's as if Sebastian knew what lay at those coordinates before the Navy found it. The wind off the sea carried the distant call of a foghorn, mournful and warning. I stood there until raindrops began to fall, thinking of the lieutenant's final words before slipping into unconsciousness. The sea keeps everyone's secrets, even God's. Tomorrow, I return to the railway office. I will sit at my desk and type Sebastian's correspondence as if nothing has changed. I will file his manifests and schedule his meetings, but now I carry a secret of my own, coordinates to something in the North Sea that connects a dying submariner's ravings to Sebastian von Vogel's shipping empire. Harold tells me I should destroy the coordinates and forget what I've seen. Some mysteries are best left unsolved, he said when I confided in him. Perhaps he's right, but I cannot help thinking of Elizabeth's words in the garden. Everyone deserves space to breathe. What if something beneath those waves is taking that space away? What am I doing here? She murmured to the empty room. When she'd boarded that ship in New York, everything had seemed straightforward. Explore her mother's past, understand her family history, perhaps find answers to questions that had shadowed her childhood. Cambridge beckoned with its libraries and scholarly opportunities, a natural extension of her academic interests. Now, barely weeks into her stay, everything had become complicated exponentially. Her mother's journals revealed wartime mysteries far darker than anticipated. Uncle Gregory's investigation had tentacles stretching across decades and continents, and Sullivan von Vogel had emerged from the theoretical realm of family adversary into the very immediate reality of a man whose touch left her skin tingling hours later. Sonya rose, stretching her cramped limbs as she moved to the kitchen to make tea. Her mother's ritual, strong English breakfast with a splash of milk, prepared whenever decisions loomed or emotions tangled. The familiar routine centered her somewhat as she waited for the kettle to boil. Michael's face appeared in her mind. Steady, familiar, safe. The kind of man who remembered her favorite sandwich and brought poetry as parting gifts. For years, she'd interpreted his careful hesitation as shyness, perhaps even emotional immaturity. Now, having experienced Sullivan's similar restraint, though for vastly different reasons, she wondered if she'd misread Michael's caution entirely. "Michael loves me," she said quietly, testing the words against the cottage silence. They felt true, yet unexpectedly hollow, an acknowledgement rather than a revelation. The kettle whistled, pulling her from reverie. As she prepared her tea, Sonya confronted the increasingly undeniable reality that her thoughts continually circled back to Sullivan, not Michael, to Yorkshire, not New York, to the mystery unfolding around her, rather than the predictable future waiting across the Atlantic. She carried her tea back to the window seat, retrieving her notebook with renewed purpose. Rather than fighting her scattered thoughts, she began to capture them as they came. Impressions, questions, and feelings laid bare across the page without judgment. Sullivan's eyes in the moonlight, ancient and sad, and somehow familiar. Why does he feel familiar? Mother wrote of bombs on midnight trains. Sebastian von Vogel shipping weapons to Germany? Yet, Uncle G hints at something more complex. Cambridge no longer feels urgent, though I should at least visit before deciding. That moment, when S almost touched my face. Why did he stop himself? Michael waits for me. Loyal, steady Michael, who has never surprised me in all the years I've known him. Sullivan is all surprise, controlled exterior, hiding something passionate beneath. Dangerous? Probably. Yet, I trust him, despite every logical reason not to." The words flowed more easily now. Stream of consciousness reflections filling pages as morning stretched toward afternoon. Outside, clouds gathered and dispersed, shadows shifting across the moors like thoughts racing across her mind. She wrote about her mother's silence regarding the past, about growing up with half her history missing, about the strange sense of homecoming she'd felt stepping onto Yorkshire soil despite never having visited before. And she wrote about Sullivan, their conversations in the bookshop and restaurant, the careful distance he maintained even while drawing her closer, the contradictions that made him simultaneously familiar and unknowable. The afternoon had deepened toward evening when the sound of tires on gravel announced Uncle Gregory's return. Sonya glanced down at herself, suddenly aware she'd spent the entire day in pajamas, writing and thinking and making periodic cups of tea. Her notebook lay open beside her, filled with confessions she hadn't intended to share. Gregory entered with the brisk energy that characterized his movements, still dressed in what appeared to be his best suit, though his tie had been loosened slightly. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm, his expression thoughtful until he spotted Sonya in the window seat. "Still in nightclothes at this hour," he observed, though his tone held amusement rather than criticism. Must have been a productive writing day. Sonya closed her notebook, suddenly self-conscious. "Time got away from me. You're looking rather formal for a Tuesday. London requires certain sartorial standards," he replied, hanging his coat on the wooden peg by the door. "Even for retired inspectors. And what adventures did the capital provide?" she asked, studying him curiously. There was something different in his bearing, a subtle tension, perhaps, or unusual fatigue. Gregory moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle before answering. "Primarily meetings with old colleagues. Scotland Yard maintains institutional memory through its retired officers almost as effectively as through its active ones." He glanced at her over his shoulder. "And you? Did Yorkshire provide adequate entertainment in my absence?" "I've been writing, thinking." Sonya drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Uncle Gregory, may I ask you something?" "Of course." He measured tea leaves into the pot with characteristic precision. "Why did you invite me to Yorkshire?" The question hung in the air between them. Gregory's hands paused momentarily before continuing their methodical preparation. "Your mother wished for you to know your heritage," he said finally. "She made me promise, near the end, that when the time was right, I would help you understand what she couldn't bring herself to tell you while alive. But there's more to it, isn't there?" Sonya persisted. "Your investigation, the journals, the railway conspiracy, it's all still active for you. I'm somehow part of it." Gregory brought 2 cups of tea to the sitting area, settling into the armchair opposite her window seat. His expression was contemplative as he considered his response. "Initially, yes," he admitted. "I thought perhaps Helena might have shared more with you than she revealed to me, that you might carry pieces of the puzzle without realizing their significance." He sipped his tea. "But watching you these past weeks, I've come to understand that your journey here has importance beyond my investigation. This is about your identity, Sonya, not merely historical evidence." "I met him," she said suddenly, the confession spilling out before she could reconsider. "Sullivan von Vogel. We had dinner at the Heather Bell. He showed me the old railway lines, documents buried beneath the tracks." Gregory's expression remained neutral, though his fingers tightened slightly around his teacup. "I suspected as much, given your rather late return last evening. You're not angry?" "Concerned, perhaps. Not angry." He studied her carefully. "Sullivan von Vogel is a complicated man from a complicated family. But then, so was. Sebastian and Helena found something in him worth understanding despite the eventual consequences." Sonya set her teacup down, suddenly unable to maintain the pretense of casual conversation. "I see something in him, Uncle Gregory. Something I've never seen in anyone before. It's as if..." She hesitated, searching for words to describe the ineffable connection. "It's as if we recognize each other, though we've only just met. I know how melodramatic that sounds. The heart rarely concerns itself with pragmatism, Gregory observed quietly, or family history. I have someone waiting for me in New York, she continued, the words tumbling out now. Michael. He's kind and steady and has loved me for years without ever quite saying so. By every rational measure, he's exactly what I should want. She pressed her palms against her eyes. But rationality seems to have abandoned me entirely since arriving in Yorkshire. Gregory watched her with surprising gentleness. Your mother experienced similar conflicts, I believe, between what appeared sensible and what felt necessary. Did she ever speak of my father? Sonya asked suddenly. Beyond the basic information she shared with me, a complex emotion crossed Gregory's features, something between compassion and hesitation. Helena kept many secrets, Sonya, some to protect you, some to protect others. Your father's identity was complicated by the circumstances of that time. Was he English? She pressed. Someone connected to the railway? The journals will reveal what Helena wished you to know, Gregory replied carefully, when you're ready to read them fully. Sonia's frustration bubbled over. Maybe I should just go home. Back to New York, back to Michael and the bookshop, and a life uncomplicated by bombs on midnight trains and buried documents, and men with sad eyes who look at me like, she faltered, like I'm both salvation and destruction. Is that what you truly want? Gregory asked. To return to incomplete knowledge, to half understanding, to questions that will undoubtedly follow you regardless of geography? No, she admitted after a long pause. But I'm afraid of where this path leads, of what I might discover about Mother, about myself, about Sullivan. Gregory set down his teacup, leaning forward with unexpected earnestness. Fear has never stopped you before, Sonya. Not when you applied to Columbia against your teacher's advice. Not when you challenged those literary critics in your thesis. Not when you boarded a ship bound for an unknown country filled with your mother's ghosts. This feels different, she whispered. More personal, more consequential. Of course it does. Because it is. He smiled slightly. The past rarely offers simple narratives or convenient heroes and villains. Your mother understood that, eventually. Sullivan von Vogel may be neither the monster some would paint him, nor the romantic figure you're beginning to imagine. The truth, as always, likely resides somewhere more nuanced. Sonya wiped unexpected tears from her cheeks. When did everything become so complicated? It always was, Gregory replied gently. We just prefer to believe in simplicity until circumstances force us to acknowledge complexity. The evening light faded outside the cottage windows as they sat in companionable silence, the weight of confession leaving Sonya feeling both vulnerable and unexpectedly lightened. Uncle Gregory hadn't offered easy reassurances or clear direction, but something more valuable, an acknowledgement of the difficult terrain she navigated and faith in her capacity to find her way through it. I should probably get dressed, she said finally, offering a watery smile. Pajamas at sunset suggests either profound laziness or existential crisis, or simply a day of necessary reflection, Gregory countered kindly, though perhaps dinner might benefit from more conventional attire. As Sonya rose to change, she paused in the doorway. You met someone in London today. Someone connected to all this? Gregory's eyebrows rose slightly. What makes you say that? Simply connecting dots, she replied with a small shrug. I notice things too. His smile held equal parts pride and caution. Astute observation. Yes, I encountered an old acquaintance, someone who knew your mother during her time here. Did it help, your investigation? Gregory considered the question carefully. It clarified certain aspects of the situation, though perhaps not in ways I anticipated. His expression grew more serious. Sonya, whatever develops between you and Sullivan von Vogel, be it friendship, romance, or nothing at all, please remember that your safety and well-being matter more to me than any historical vindication or investigative conclusion. The unexpected declaration touched her deeply. "Thank you, Uncle Gregory." As she climbed the stairs to change, Sonya felt a curious sense of resolution forming within the confusion. Whether she returned to New York eventually or remained in England, whether Sullivan proved villain or hero or something more human than either classification, she would face these truths directly rather than retreating from them. Her mother had fled England carrying evidence and secrets and an unborn child. Sonya would not flee Yorkshire carrying unanswered questions and unresolved feelings. Whatever awaited her on this path, disappointment, danger, or perhaps something unexpectedly wonderful, she would meet it with open eyes. The pink silk scarf with its golden bird still lay across her bedpost, catching the last light of evening like a beacon or a warning. The Yorkshire Post headline caught Sonya's eye as she entered the village bakery. Vogel railway restoration approved by Transport Board. Sullivan's photograph accompanied the article. Impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression composed yet triumphant as he stood beside aged railway tracks that would soon carry trains again. A week had passed since their moonlit exploration, since his warning about pursuing certain secrets. 7 days of silence from whispering pines, though Sonya had found herself unconsciously listening for the Jaguar's engine each time gravel crunched on the lane outside the cottage. "Quite the achievement," Mrs. Thorne commented, following Sonya's gaze to the newspaper as she wrapped fresh scones in wax paper. "The board's been refusing his applications for years. Suddenly they've changed their tune entirely. Do you know why?" Sonya asked, accepting the warm package. "Money talks, dear. Always has in railway business." The older woman lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Though my nephew works for British Rail, says there's an investor behind young Mr. Vogel. Someone with considerable influence in London circles." Sonya thanked her, tucking the newspaper under her arm as she left. The article mentioned infrastructure investment potential and historical preservation, but nothing about metal boxes buried beside tracks or midnight trains testing abandoned lines. The public narrative, it seemed, differed significantly from what she'd glimpsed in the moonlight. The week's distance had provided welcome space to think, to process her tangled feelings about Sullivan. She'd spent hours with her mother's journals, carefully reading entries from 1941 to 1942, searching for clues about Helena's relationship with Sebastian and the mysterious J who appeared increasingly in her writings. The revelations about bomb shipments had deepened into something more complex. Hints of intelligence operations, resistance networks, and double agents. Nothing was as straightforward as it initially appeared. Not the railway operations, not her mother's flight from England, and certainly not Sullivan von Vogel himself. "Ready for Cambridge?" Uncle Gregory asked as she entered the cottage. He stood before the hall mirror, adjusting his tie with unusual attention to detail. "Almost," Sonya replied, setting down the bakery package. "Just need to change." The planned visit to Cambridge University had been Gregory's suggestion. A day trip to tour the library sciences facilities, meet with potential advisors, and explore future possibilities. Though Sonya's academic ambitions had receded somewhat amid Yorkshire's mysteries, the excursion offered welcome structure and forward momentum. An hour later, they were traveling south in Gregory's modest Austin, the rolling countryside gradually flattening as they approached Cambridge. Sonya found herself watching passing trains with newfound awareness, analyzing their cargo, wondering about destinations, seeing the railway network as Sullivan might, a web of connections and possibilities rather than merely transportation. The von Vogel application was approved, she mentioned casually as they passed a freight train on a parallel track. "It was in this morning's paper." Gregory's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Yes, I heard. Remarkable how quickly certain obstacles vanish when sufficient pressure is applied." "What kind of pressure?" "The financial kind, primarily." His tone remained neutral, though something in his expression suggested deeper concerns. "Morrison Transport has partnered with the von Vogel restoration project. James Morrison has considerable influence with the board." "Morrison," Sonya repeated, the name triggering recognition. Sullivan mentioned him during dinner. He seemed cautious when discussing him. Gregory's sideways glance held sudden interest. Did he? What exactly did Sullivan say about Morrison? Not much, she admitted. Just that he'd transformed wartime connections into peacetime success. The topic seemed to make him uncomfortable. Interesting, Gregory murmured, more to himself than to her. As Cambridge's ancient spires appeared on the horizon, Sonya noticed her uncle checking the rearview mirror with unusual frequency. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Merely an old policeman's habit," he replied, though his eyes continued to track a dark sedan several cars behind them. One develops certain reflexes after decades in detective work. The city welcomed them with its timeless elegance. Medieval colleges alongside modern facilities, students hurrying between lectures, tourists meandering through historic courtyards. They parked near King's College, Gregory consulting a small notebook with their day's itinerary. Professor Whitcombe at 11:30, library tour at 1, meeting with the admissions committee at 3, he read. "Shall we begin with a stroll through the old town? We have nearly an hour before our first appointment." Cambridge wrapped around them like a living museum. Cobblestone streets, bookshops with volumes stacked to the ceiling, cafes bustling with animated academic discussions. Yet beneath the scholarly atmosphere, Sonya couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Twice, she caught glimpses of a man in a dark overcoat appearing and disappearing among the crowds. Gregory's hand occasionally touched her elbow, subtly redirecting their path through less congested areas. "Are we being followed?" she asked quietly as they paused outside a medieval church. Gregory's expression remained casual, though his eyes continually scanned their surroundings. Possibly. Though observed might be the more accurate term. By whom? "Various interested parties monitor my movements periodically," he replied with surprising matter-of-factness. One develops a certain sensitivity to surveillance after years in the field. Before she could press for clarification, Gregory checked his watch. "We should head toward the history faculty. Professor Whitcombe is something of a stickler for punctuality." The morning passed in a blur of introductions and tours. Professor Whitcombe, a silver-haired woman with piercing intelligence and dry humor, described the library sciences program with evident passion. The ancient reading rooms with their oak shelves and green-shaded lamps called to Sonia's bibliophile heart, momentarily overshadowing Yorkshire's mysteries with scholarly potential. "Your academic record is quite impressive," Whitcombe remarked as they concluded their meeting. "We would welcome your application should you decide Cambridge is your path forward." By early afternoon, they had toured the university library and shared lunch at a bustling pub frequented by faculty. Throughout, Gregory maintained casual conversation while his eyes remained watchful. The dark-coated figure had disappeared, but Sonya noticed other observers. A woman lingering too long over coffee at a nearby table, a man repeatedly consulting his watch on the same street corner. "Uncle Gregory," she began as they walked toward the admissions office. "These people watching us." "Miss Matthews," a man's voice interrupted, brisk and professional. "A moment of your time, please." A wiry individual with horn-rimmed glasses and an over-eager smile approached notepad already in hand. A press badge hung from his tweed jacket lapel. "Martin Cleary, Cambridge Chronicle." He introduced himself breathlessly. "Might I ask a few questions about your connection to the von Vogel railway restoration?" Gregory stepped forward. "My niece has no comment for the press, Mr. Cleary." "I'm more interested in her mother's journalistic work during the war," Cleary persisted, addressing Sonya directly. Helena Matthews' articles for the Yorkshire Post under the pen name "In Blackwell" covered several suspicious railway incidents in 1941. Given Sullivan von Vogel's current project and your recent dinner with him at the Heather Bell, readers might wonder if there's a family reconciliation underway. Sonya felt her pulse quicken. Her mother had been a journalist. Under a pseudonym? The revelation blindsided her, as did the reporter's knowledge of her dinner with Sullivan. I don't know what you're talking about, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Sources at Morrison Transport suggest the original von Vogel to Matthews conflict involved wartime shipping irregularities, Cleary continued, scribbling notes. Care to comment on allegations that Sebastian von Vogel shipped armaments to Germany while claiming to transport coal? Gregory's posture stiffened. That's quite enough, Mr. Cleary. These allegations are both unfounded and potentially libelous. And yet, Morrison Transport now partners with Sullivan von Vogel to resurrect these same railway lines, the reporter countered. Lines your sister's investigations suggested were used for treasonous purposes. Does this new generation partnership represent atonement or continuation, Miss Matthews? Sonya felt caught in quicksand, each question pulling her deeper into history she only partially understood. How did this provincial reporter know details she was still discovering? Who had informed him about her dinner with Sullivan? Miss Matthews has no connection to railway operations, historic or contemporary. A new voice interrupted, deep, authoritative, unmistakable. Sullivan von Vogel materialized beside them, his unexpected appearance momentarily stunning all parties. Immaculate in a navy suit that suggested he'd come directly from business in London, he positioned himself subtly between Sonya and the reporter. Mr. von Vogel. Cleary's eyes widened with journalistic opportunity. Would you care to address rumors that Morrison Transport's involvement in your railway restoration connects to historical operations during... I would care to address your harassment of a private citizen with no connection to my business affairs. Sullivan cut in, his tone glacial though his expression remained perfectly composed. Miss Matthews is pursuing academic opportunities at Cambridge, not press interviews about railway history. The public has a right to know if... The public has no rights whatsoever regarding Miss Matthews' personal life, Sullivan countered. Now, I believe she and her uncle have an appointment at the admissions office. Good day, Mr. Cleary. The dismissal carried such authority that the reporter took a step backward. Sullivan placed a light hand at the small of Sonia's back, guiding her and Gregory away from the sputtering journalist with such natural command that both followed without question. This way, he murmured, steering them toward a medieval archway leading to a secluded courtyard. Only when they were safely beyond the reporter's view did he step back, maintaining a respectful distance that contradicted the protective intimacy of moments before. Mr. von Vogel, Gregory acknowledged, his tone neutral, though his eyes were sharp with assessment. Your timing is remarkably convenient. I was meeting with potential investors at Trinity College, Sullivan explained. Pure coincidence that our paths crossed. His eyes met Sonia's for the first time in a week, the connection immediate and electric despite the circumstances. Are you all right? He asked, genuine concern evident beneath his composed exterior. Surprised, she admitted, both by the reporter's questions and by your appearance. Journalists often overreach when pursuing historical angles, Sullivan replied, though something in his expression suggested the encounter troubled him more than he acknowledged. Martin Cleary has been investigating railway operations for years with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Yet he knew about our dinner, Sonya pointed out, and about my mother's journalism under a pseudonym I'd never even heard of. Sullivan's gaze shifted briefly to Gregory. Small villages breed gossip. As for your mother's writing career, I assumed you were aware. There are many aspects of Helena's life that Sonya is still discovering, Gregory interjected, her journalistic work being among them. An awkward silence settled between the three of them, laden with unspoken questions and connections. Sullivan checked his watch. The same gold timepiece he'd consulted during their dinner, Sonya noticed. Your admissions appointment, he reminded them. I shouldn't keep you. Thank you for your intervention, Sonya said, finding her voice. Though I'm curious how you recognized that particular reporter from across a crowded street. The ghost of a smile touched Sullivan's lips. Von Vogel's developed a certain sensitivity to press attention. Rather like your uncle's professional awareness of surveillance. Gregory's eyebrows rose slightly at the observation. Indeed. though one wonders who might be sufficiently interested in a retired inspector and his niece to warrant such attention. Railways have always attracted numerous interested parties, Sullivan replied evenly. Historical, commercial, political. His gaze returned to Sonya, something softening in his expression. How are you finding Cambridge? Beautiful, academic. Exactly what I expected. She hesitated, then added, "Congratulations on your railway approval. It was in this morning's paper. Thank you. A significant step forward, though much work remains." Sullivan seemed about to say more, then reconsidered. "I should let you continue your tour. Academic futures take precedence over railway reminiscences. And surveillance operations, apparently," Gregory added mildly. Sullivan's expression revealed nothing, though his eyes remained on Sonia's. "Until next time, Miss Matthews." "Sonya," she corrected, as she had at the restaurant. The smile that touched his eyes didn't quite reach his lips. "Sonya," he acknowledged, the name itself becoming somehow intimate between them. With a formal nod to Gregory, he departed, striding across the courtyard with confident purpose, disappearing through another archway as suddenly as he'd appeared. That, Gregory observed dryly, was not a coincidence. "You think he followed us to Cambridge?" Sonya asked, still watching the spot where Sullivan had vanished. "I think Mr. von Vogel has resources that allow him to be precisely where he wishes, precisely when it proves most advantageous." Gregory checked his watch. "We should proceed to the admissions office. I suspect Cambridge's scholarly appeal may face significant competition from Yorkshire's mysteries." As they crossed the ancient courtyard, Sonya wondered which was more significant, Sullivan's timely intervention or the reporter's unexpected revelations about her mother. Helena Matthews, journalist. M. Blackwell, investigative reporter. Another layer to the woman she'd known as simply mother, quiet, private, determined that her daughter pursue education above all else. What other discoveries awaited in those journal pages? What other connections might explain the persistent surveillance, the reporter's questions, and Sullivan's protective appearance? Cambridge's spires reached skyward around her, offering the academic future she'd crossed an ocean to explore. Yet her thoughts remained in Yorkshire, with abandoned railway lines, buried metal boxes, and a man whose eyes held secrets he both concealed and revealed with every glance. The admissions committee meeting proceeded with academic formality, application requirements outlined, scholarship opportunities discussed, housing arrangements detailed. Sonya answered questions about her Columbia transcript and research interests with practiced composure, though her thoughts continually drifted to the courtyard encounter with Sullivan and the journalist's revelations about her mother. Professor Whitcombe observed the proceedings with keen attention, her silver-framed spectacles occasionally catching the afternoon light as she made precise notations in a leather-bound planner. Though she'd handed the meeting over to the admissions director, her occasional incisive questions revealed she remained the intellectual force in the room. As the meeting concluded, handshakes were exchanged and pleasantries were offered. Gregory consulted his watch, mentioning the drive back to Yorkshire. Sonya gathered her materials and prepared to depart when Professor Whitcombe's crisp voice cut through the general farewells. "Miss Matthews, might I have a word with you privately before you leave? There's a matter regarding special collections access I'd like to discuss." Gregory raised an eyebrow slightly, but nodded his understanding. "I'll wait in the antechamber." The admissions officers filed out, leaving Sonya alone with Professor Whitcombe in the oak-paneled room. Rather than returning to academic matters, the professor moved to close the heavy door before turning to Sonya with an entirely different expression. Less institutional authority, more human curiosity. "The special collections matter is merely a pretext," she admitted frankly. "I wanted to speak with you woman to woman, without the administrative pageantry." Sonya blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. "About what, Professor?" "About that rather unpleasant scene with the reporter. For a start, Whitcombe gestured toward two armchairs positioned near the window overlooking the college gardens, and about the young man who so decisively intervened. Sullivan von Vogel, wasn't it? I recognized him from the business periodicals. Sonya settled into the offered chair, uncertain how to respond. Professor Whitcombe took the seat opposite, removing her spectacles to reveal remarkably astute hazel eyes. Cambridge may appear isolated in its academic bubble, Miss Matthews, but we observe more than obscure textual variations and medieval manuscript provenance. She smiled slightly, particularly those of us who lived through certain historical events rather than merely studying them. You knew my mother, Sonya guessed, something in the professor's manner suggesting personal rather than academic knowledge. Not directly, Whitcombe clarified, though I was certainly aware of M. Blackwell's work. Your mother wrote with remarkable clarity about complex situations, a quality surprisingly rare in wartime journalism. She replaced, her spectacles, studying Sonya with renewed focus. You have her forehead and eyebrows, though your coloring differs somewhat. You recognized me as her daughter? I suspected when I received your inquiry about library sciences. Helena Matthews' daughter pursuing a career organizing and preserving knowledge seemed rather fitting. Whitcombe leaned back slightly. Then that reporter's questions confirmed my suspicions. Sonya hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. I'm only beginning to learn about my mother's journalistic work. She never spoke of it. Many didn't speak of their wartime roles, Whitcombe observed, particularly women who operated in traditionally male domains. Your mother's investigations into railway operations showed remarkable courage, given the climate of the time. What exactly did she write about? Sonya asked, hunger for knowledge overcoming caution. Whitcombe considered her response carefully. Infrastructure discrepancies primarily. Cargo manifests that didn't align with official records. Personnel changes at key junction points, technical details that seemed mundane to casual readers, but revealed significant patterns to those paying attention. She adjusted her spectacles. Her analysis of the Yorkshire-Hamburg connection proved particularly insightful, though it disappeared from publication rather abruptly in late 1942. The timing aligned precisely with Helena's flight to America, Sonya realized. Do you know why she stopped writing? There were rumors, Whitcombe replied, her tone measured. Though academia generally disdains rumor in favor of documented evidence. She paused, studying Sonya's expression. May I speak frankly, Miss Matthews? Please, you find yourself at an intersection of personal history and contemporary dynamics that few young women encounter. Your mother navigated similar terrain during equally complicated times. The professor's gaze was direct, yet compassionate. That young man who intervened today, Sullivan von Vogel, represents both your family's past and potentially your future. Such connections rarely occur without significant implications. Sonya felt her cheeks warm slightly. I barely know him, yet he appeared precisely when needed in a city miles from his usual environs. Whitcombe's expression held no judgment, merely observation, and positioned himself between you and potential harm with rather remarkable efficiency. The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. What exactly are you suggesting, Professor? Nothing prescriptive, I assure you. Whitcombe smiled slightly, merely offering a perspective from someone who has observed how history tends to echo across generations. Your mother made certain choices under particular pressures. You now face your own choices, with different yet parallel considerations. Did you know anything about her relationship with Sebastian von Vogel? Sonya asked, venturing into territory she'd barely discussed with Uncle Gregory. Only what careful readers might infer from her writing, Whitcombe replied. Her early articles maintained professional distance. Later pieces suggested more personal knowledge of internal operations. The von Vogel name appeared with increasing frequency, often with contextual nuance that suggested first-hand observation rather than secondary research. The professor's analytical approach to her mother's history felt strangely comforting, neither romanticized nor condemned, simply observed with scholarly attention to detail. I never knew this side of her, Sonya admitted. In New York, she was simply my mother, focused on my education, determined I should have opportunities she hadn't. Perhaps that was her greatest achievement, Whitcombe suggested, creating sufficient distance from her past that you could develop independently of its shadows. She leaned forward slightly. Yet here you are, drawn back to those very shadows, navigating similar complexities with your own generation's von Vogel. The observation landed with unexpected weight. I didn't come to England looking for Sullivan, Sonya protested. Of course not. Yet, circumstances have a remarkable way of recreating essential patterns. Whitcombe's tone softened slightly. Forgive my directness, Miss Matthews. Age and academic tenure afford certain conversational liberties. I appreciate directness, Sonya assured her. There's been precious little of it since I arrived in Yorkshire. Then let me offer this observation. Your mother appears to have made difficult choices that prioritized your future over her past. A profound gift, though one that inevitably created certain gaps in your understanding of yourself. Whitcombe removed her spectacles, polishing them carefully with a silk handkerchief. The question now becomes what you will do with both the gift and the gaps. What would you do? Sonya asked, suddenly valuing this forthright woman's perspective. Whitcombe replaced her spectacles with methodical precision. I can't answer that, though I appreciate the implied trust in the question. She considered for a moment before continuing. I can, however, share what I've observed in my 67 years. We rarely regret the truths we pursue, only those we avoid out of fear or convenience. She rose, moving to the window where afternoon sun illuminated the ancient courtyard below. I was approximately your age during the war. I made certain choices, professional, personal, occasionally controversial, that shaped the decades that followed. Her profile against the light seemed suddenly younger, touched by memory. I pursued knowledge rather than marriage, academic contribution rather than traditional feminine fulfillment. My contemporaries often questioned these priorities. Turning back to Sonya, her expression held neither regret nor defensiveness, simply clarity. I chose my path not because it was easy or expected, but because it aligned with my essential nature. That alignment, Miss Matthews, is what ultimately matters, not external expectations or historical echoes, but congruence between one's choices and one's authentic self. How does one determine that authentic self? Sonya asked, the question more vulnerable than she'd intended. By noticing what consistently draws you forward, despite obstacles or contradictory advice, Whitcombe replied without hesitation. By recognizing the questions that wake you at night and the pursuits that make you forget time entirely. She smiled slightly. Your application materials suggest library sciences interest you considerably. Yet your attention during our campus tour seemed captured more by historical questions than cataloging methodologies. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Throughout the day, Sonya had found herself wondering about her mother's journalism, Sullivan's railway restoration, the mysterious J from the journals, not the Dewey Decimal System or archival preservation techniques that should have occupied a prospective library sciences student. Cambridge will remain, Whitcombe continued gently. The university has stood for centuries. It can wait another term or year if necessary. Some questions, however, offer brief windows of opportunity before closing permanently. Sonya met the professor's gaze directly. You think I should stay in Yorkshire until I understand my mother's history? I think you should honor your authentic curiosity wherever it leads, Whitcombe corrected. Whether that path runs through Cambridge's libraries or Yorkshire's railway stations matters less than your willingness to follow it with integrity and courage. She moved to her desk, extracting a small card from a drawer. My private contact information should you wish to discuss academic matters or other questions in the future. Unlike that reporter, I understand the value of discretion regarding personal history. Sonya accepted the card, touched by the unexpected alliance. Thank you, Professor. For both the academic consideration and the personal counsel, women must support each other's intellectual and personal journeys, Whitcombe replied matter-of-factly. particularly when those journeys defy conventional expectations. She extended her hand in a formal gesture that somehow conveyed a genuine connection. "Whatever path you choose, Miss Matthews, I suspect your mother would recognize her courage in your pursuit of truth, however uncomfortable that truth might prove." As they rejoined Uncle Gregory in the antechamber, Sonya felt a curious sense of empowerment settling alongside her uncertainty. Professor Whitcombe had offered neither easy answers nor sentimental reassurances, only clear-eyed recognition of the complex choices before her and faith in her capacity to navigate them. Walking back through Cambridge's ancient courtyards toward the waiting car, Sonya found herself standing straighter, observing her surroundings with sharper attention. The university's timeless buildings have witnessed centuries of human dramas, academic discoveries, personal transformations. Her own story, with its railway mysteries, family secrets, and unexpected connections, was merely one thread in that vast tapestry. Yet it was her thread to weave, with patterns of her choosing. "Productive conversation?" Gregory asked as they reached the car. Sonya glanced back at the university spires reaching skyward against the afternoon sky, then toward the north, where Yorkshire's moors and mysteries awaited. "Unexpectedly so," she replied, a new certainty in her voice. "I believe I'm beginning to understand what I'm looking for here in England. Whether that search led toward or away from Sullivan von Vogel remained to be seen." But for perhaps the first time since arriving, Sonya felt herself moving forward, not merely as Helena Matthews' daughter or Gregory Constant's niece, but as herself, a woman making deliberate choices based on her essential nature, whatever consequences those choices might ultimately bring.